Hi everybody, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining the Boardroom Club today to our AI Summit, featuring executives from top tech companies revolutionizing the world as we speak. My name is Yossi Garmazi, and I'm joined here also by a good friend of mine, Alvaro Jimenez. Alvaro?
Pleasure to be here, Yossi.
Yeah, so today we are fortunate enough to interview none other than Olivia Nottebohm, CEO of Box, a company that revolutionizing the way businesses collaborate and manage content in the digital age. Olivia's experience is unparalleled, from McKinsey to Google, Dropbox, and Notion, where she helps scale global teams and drive customers' focused growth. Now at Box, she plays a pivotal role in shaping the company's strategy, operation, and innovation. So, Olivia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Yossi. Thank you, Alvaro.
Yeah, so Olivia, I thought to start with an interesting question about your career, because earlier in your career, you have mentioned that your time at Google, Dropbox, and Notion taught you to operate across product, sales, and customers facing operations. Which of these two disciplines do you think most organizations maybe undervalue, and why?
Well, I think in tech, there's archetypes of companies. So often what happens in a PLG type company is that they think less about or maybe underappreciate the customer facing part that is of more of the go-to-market motion, because that seems simple. And the PLG motion is kind of what got them there. And then, of course, at some point in their scaling, they discover that in order to scale to the next level, they will need that go-to-market motion. And so they lean more into that. So it's not a question of being underappreciated. I think it's just more of a maturity curve as different tech companies are going through their evolution as a company.
I agree, and I actually have a couple of questions about the PLG specifically at Notion, but I will ask it in a couple of minutes. But I have another question. So you have joined many large companies, as I mentioned in the intro, but what was the process like learning the business? Because it's not like you entered as an entry level and said, okay, I can take the time. You need just to start and roll. Did you start with customers, maybe the employees, or something else?
Well, you always start with the customers, yes, because they're the ones who are experiencing the product. And so I always make sure that in my ramp, I'm spending time talking to customers and partners where there are partners involved, because they're an extension of the company. And then, of course, the team members themselves. Basically, my learning is never assume. Just, there's always a reason for everything. Everyone makes decisions with right intentions. And so whatever decisions are there were made for some reason, right? And so it's just a series of discovery, of understanding how we are where we are and why we do things as we're doing things, and just always keeping an open mind and not judging any of it, just soaking it all in and absorbing it.
Absolutely. And interesting company that you work with early on is Notion, and it's different from all the other companies because it was sort of community-led growth and bottom-up adoption model, which is different than Box in a way, right? Because Box is more enterprise-focused and top-down approach. But how do you reconcile those different growth philosophies when thinking about the Box future?
So Notion is a beautiful product. As you noted, it's a PLG motion, and it really derives from the nature of the product itself, as Ivan and his team designed it, right? Which is this beautiful UI. The individual wants to use it. They typically prefer it over other editor tools. And so it becomes this groundswell of user adoption. And that was kind of the strategic vector in, which was this beautiful UI that's so easy to use and, really delightful in how you use it. Now, differentiated than a Box, which is strategic vector into the market, was actually, okay, we see what Dropbox is doing. That's the kind of individual consumer motion. And what the opportunity here for Box now is to come in and satisfy the needs of highly regulated industries with high need for security and governance and permissioning and everything that's really required to operate in those more regulated industries. And so that was more of the, okay, we're going to start with enterprise. And it was a very smart decision, right? Because really they still own that market spot today. And so it proved very effective wedge into the market.
Yeah, and I've actually watched a very interesting interview of yours when you spoke about Notion and the community-led growth, and how the ambassador programs was so effective there in driving the growth of the company. And okay, so now you are at Box, and Box benefited from remote work, but now, as we all know, people coming back to the office. But there is also another big disruption, which is the new AI era, right? So you have dealt with these kind of changes at Box, but how did you ensure that the company has the right infrastructure in order to move forward and really pull it off?
I would say first and foremost, the confluence of unstructured data that Box is so good at, and the ability to now use AI and agentic AI on that unstructured data is just a game changer for Box in the sense that people trust us with their unstructured data, their content. They know we can protect it and secure it. And that is a precursor for any successful AI strategy. Because as we know, if you don't make sure that your data is protected, agents can do a lot of very creative things with that data. And so first and foremost, any serious enterprise company needs to make sure that first that unstructured data is secure. And then how you actually get at the insights and the workflows and the intelligence from that unstructured data is the big unlock that Box can provide. Now, you also asked about return to work. For us, that obviously that was a time when many SaaS companies benefited because really employers were first and foremost making sure that their team members could do the work while sitting at home, right? And they didn't have to pay for T&E, as we know. So they said, okay, we'll move that money into SaaS deployments because if that helps our workers, that's good for us. And so, yeah, of course, we're on the other side of that as more and more people come back into work. But because it's also at the time when AI is really coming in, and it's not just about will you use AI, but how will you use AI, that it's actually perfect timing for the Box platform to be able to provide such a secure surface area on which people can drive intelligence for their business.
That's right. We just heard about Meta, a new data center in the size of Manhattan. So I guess companies like Box could benefit from it. And it's interesting because these two differences you have made while being a public company, which is very hard to do. And indeed, it seems that it worked out because Box recently surpassed the $1 billion of ARR for the first time. But if you can share with us what strategic decisions do you think were most critical in reaching this milestone? Maybe a big pivot or just a strategic decision?
So it is really important just to step back in the context of things, I think, because we live in this world of Silicon Valley, or at least, most of us who think about tech all day long are in that world, and we think valuations, right? And so unicorns kind of passe. Oh, so what if you got $1 billion valuation? Now it's like, are you a decacorn, right? $10 billion valuation. And now, of course, we see it going even higher for some of these Series A companies. But actually, only a handful of companies have actually achieved $1 billion of software revenue. And so as standalone companies, many have started and then gotten gobbled up, but it's actually just in the tens of companies that have ever done this. So that is a big milestone, you're right. I would say that in terms of strategic impetus, we've really focused on 4 things. One is just making sure that everyone knows what we can unlock with content plus AI. So making sure that there's an awareness and an understanding of all that Box can do. Gone are the days of just file sync and share. And here we can really drive entire themes and insights and intelligence from that unstructured data. And we are the best positioned to do it because that's our legacy. The second piece strategically is really delivering solutions. So, okay, now you have all this unstructured data. How do you drive a workflow out of it? So much so that you actually don't actually need entire steps along what used to be very manual processes where forms or applications or pieces of content were pushed from one person to another with information being extracted along the way. Now you can do all of that with metadata extraction and agents, and you can actually automate an entire workflow. So that's the second pillar. And then the third pillar is partner ecosystem, being partner first, and knowing that these are very highly valued solutions for a customer, but who better understands the customer's processes than the system integrators or partners that they work with, right? So really making sure that we're going hand in hand to our customers with them. And then the fourth piece is being an AI first company ourselves and making sure that as we run our company and as we get things done, we are always AI first about it.
That's fascinating. And you mentioned being an AI first company. So you actually just wrote a very interesting article called Becoming an AI first company. And you emphasize that AI is not just about automating workflows, but reimagining what's possible. So could you share us an example at Box where you scrapped a legacy workflow and replaced it with something more radical that really transformed the way you operate?
Yes. And as you mentioned in that white paper that Aaron and I wrote, we talked about kind of the steps along the way. So first, you're an AI, you're leveraging AI for insights, and that's the level at which you're able to leverage this new trend in the market. The next is, okay, now you're having AI do a task for you, but it's kind of very precise and specific. And then the third level is, oh, now you're leveraging AI to complete an entire workflow. And that becomes really special because now all of a sudden you can have people able to pull back from those more manual workflows and able to do new and interesting stuff where they extend themselves. So to answer your question, an example would be actually a situation where we get in what's called an SOW, a statement of work, right? So we're being asked to actually respond to, okay, these sets of services are needed in order to do this XYZ implementation. And what we've done there is we actually have the request come in, the metadata, the important fields out of that request are extracted. They're put now into an SOW creation agent. So they then create a document that's responding to that workflow, but we've informed and given context to that agent by providing them all previous responses of SOWs that we've actually won. So the agent knows what good looks like. And then that triggers a document creation of what the response is. And here's your SOW for XYZ customer. And then it goes out for signature, all on the Box platform. So it's a pretty automagical process, and it's been fun to design. The one thing you do learn by doing this is you have to really know what is the process you want to design, because often you're not just transcribing the process that exists. And so you have to be very thoughtful about it and be very specific, so all these steps can actually be automated.
That's right, because I guess you don't want to mess around with processes that already work and you just want to optimize them and maybe push them to the bleeding edge. But
Right.
when you see a lot of processes, I guess, at Box, how you decide if you want to overhaul them versus optimize them?
Well, so we do actually think about that very intentionally, right? Which is, first of all, what are the processes that we have, and what are the processes where we can kind of get the biggest bang for our buck in terms of time and effort put in? Because you do have to plan out the process, you do have to create the agent, you do have to wire up the workflow. And so making sure that the lift that's required then of course is outweighed by the gains. Of course, we typically refer to that as ROI. And so what we ended up doing was saying, okay, what are the processes that have the most amount of surface area across Boxers? And in this case, like a good example would be a discovery of a customer or an opportunity at a customer, because you have lead generation team members working on it, you have account executives working on it, you even often have customer success managers working on it. And so it actually touches a lot of roles across Box. And so that's an example where we went in and we created agents to help them do those tasks. And that's all very scalable, because then anyone in that role type has access to that agent.
Absolutely. And Alvaro is actually a very interesting questions about AI agents, but I do have one last question before I pass the mic to Alvaro. So as we all know now, there is all the AI infrastructure that people just put their information, but it's sort of a void, right? Because you don't really know what the company is gonna do with your information. Maybe they're gonna reuse it and train their machines on top of it. So you've emphasized that AI agents can keep a secret, meaning data permissions must remain separate and enforceable. Can you elaborate on this principle, and how do you see it evolving with more autonomous agents in the next couple of years?
Yes, I think we all have a deep appreciation that agents are very industrious. And the whole definition of agentic AI is you actually tell them the thing you want them to do, but they might take different ways to do it. And so much so that they might not take the same way every time, right? And so they're very industrious. And so we do say that AI agents cannot keep a secret. And so what we do is we make sure that the permissioning and the governance is all attached to the user to make sure that really whatever the agents is discovering or finding or providing answers to is only that data that the user themselves would have been able to access. And I think people get a little cavalier with this in other types of applications where they disassociate who has access and who has permission with just giving agents rights to do things. And honestly, I think we'll see a lot of missteps and news headlines around that because there's a lot of damage, frankly, that agents can do when it comes to sharing data that they shouldn't be sharing, data leakage, et cetera. And I would say just everything I was describing were box agents. So that's something that we feel very comfortable doing because we know those box agents are working across the Box platform and it's within that regulated, very highly governed and secure surface area that they're working. And so that really gives us the ability to be very innovative and very creative because we know whatever they do is highly secure.
That's interesting. And specifically, I guess when you work as an enterprise and you want just to optimize processes, but you say, oh, maybe the client doesn't want me to train my data based on whatever he gave me. So it's very interesting time indeed. And Olivia, I got a bunch of more questions to ask you, but Alvaro here is also fascinating questions. So Alvaro, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yossi. So first off, I just wanted to say I'm very happy. I learned a very interesting word you mentioned before, automagical. That's something that, because we see these developments, the first time that I used ChatGPT, and it was like a little bit of a wow moment. I thought like, yeah, this is a technology advanced enough. It does look like magic. And when you put on AI agents, indeed makes sense. So, but we're talking about agents and we're talking about, maybe you've had this experience also with AI agents in the customer service in particular, which is the most damning to me because there was an MIT study a couple months ago that revealed that 95% of the AI agents don't deliver. You end up having to talk to a real human to get your problem resolved, right? So why do you think this is happening, given the potential that they have?
Well, so I would actually say this something I was raised on, which is learn a lot, but don't believe a word. And that was something my scientist father from Argentina would always tell me. And so you really have to look pretty closely at that MIT study for what it's worth, like what the end count is, how many people they talked to, what was the scenarios they were looking at, all of that. So that would just be like an open question I would have for readers who consumed that study. Separately, I would also say we are encouraging and we ourselves are in the time of letting 1,000 flowers bloom. And we actually want people to try things and have it fail. And it's okay if it fails. So even if I were to take that result full stock, which again, I have many questions about, and someone were to tell me, hey, the majority of AI pilots fail, I would say, hey, as long as they're being managed as a portfolio of experiments, that's great. That means people are trying things and they're figuring out what's working. And then hopefully they find that vein of gold and they go with the thing that works and then they scale it. And by the way, as we all know from diversified investing, it only takes like 2 or 3 out of a portfolio to really hit, right? To make a huge difference. And so in its own right, I don't think that's like a damning statement, but it does underscore the need to manage, right, the innovation, which is like, okay, let's let people experiment. Let's actually see what works and what doesn't. And then the second we find something that like, oh, hey, there's momentum here, there's gravity here, let's actually then empower and enable those teams to scale it, right? And I'll give you an example of that. We have a public sector go-to-market team. They're very innovative in what they do. And they've come up with so many agent ideas because they're in Box AI Studio, they're playing around in a sandbox. And then every now and then they're like, oh, this one's great. This one's really working, right? And then they take it to our admin and our admin scales it and makes it available to all of our AEs across Box, right? And so I do think that experimentation should be an intentional step. And I actually think it's wonderful.
Obviously, that's how you push the envelope in the technology. And many people say that we're still in the infancy, right, of AI. So
Right.
potential is great. So let's go to AI tools, right? So Box has introduced AI-powered tools like Box Extract and Box Automate. How do you envision these tools transforming daily operations for enterprise? Like, what are the key selling aspects?
In fact, I see it every day because I'm in these conversations with customers every day. I'm reviewing all these deals that leverage, automate, and extract. So what we're seeing is a couple of buckets. One is when the work that was being done can just be done in an automated fashion. So take an insurance company, right? We have many insurance companies as our customers. What happens as a workflow? Well, insurance claims get submitted and someone looks at them. They look for key pieces of data. You can see people literally like hitting the down button as they scroll through an insurance claim to look for whatever piece of information they're looking for. And so all of that with Box Extract can just be automagically, to use the word again, extracted out of those documents, and then decisions can be made based on that metadata. And that's where automate comes in. So if you have certain logic in terms of, okay, if this insurance claim notes XYZ factor, then it should be submitted with this amount of money and to this receiver. All of that is kind of what we call a logic flow, right? And that's Box Automate on the background, actually then routing those claims accordingly. So of course, you always have to check fidelity at the end of that process. We believe in human in the loop, but all of that can now be done on the Box platform through that functionality.
So we already have existing tools that work, and there's also a bunch of opportunities for including AI in this toolkit. And you've talked before about unstructured data. So you've mentioned that unstructured data is Box's strategic white space, right? And AI enables to turn it into structured insights. That's like the first real good use case of AI.
Yeah.
So what has surprised you the most about how customers that are using Box exploit unstructured content?
Honestly, it's just this like big unlock. I was in a meeting with one of the largest companies by market cap in the world yesterday, and they're like on this journey of, okay, we have all the unstructured data in Box. So first of all, what's useful, right? And we had this long conversation, and it's like, actually, what we used to think as useful, quote unquote, has now 1,000x'd, because all of a sudden you can access information in documents that you could never even comprehend accessing before, because there was such a barrier to the manual nature of what you would have to do to access it. So now even the paradigm of what is useful data has shifted, because all of a sudden you can use research results from XYZ study in this country that you could have never honestly found before in your repository of unstructured data. And so it's just opened up this whole world of like, actually, how can you innovate? What is the information you can leverage? What are the patterns you can find? What are the decisions you can inform? And so it's really fun to be with our customers on that journey as they think about, oh, wow, like I can actually do entirely new things that I could never do before as a result.
Sounds like a pivot, right? So it's moved from a cloud storage solution to more of a content cloud platform because of the capabilities that you've unlocked via your tools, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we made the move from storage to content management years ago, right? Because you could do across a whole life science of content. So you could create the content, you could manage the content, you could permission it, you could make sure what exactly was copied and shared and all of the key parts of a content lifecycle. But now you add AI into it and you get all of the intelligence, and that's a huge unlock. So now we call it intelligent content management.
Yes, you've talked about the content management and the AI layer on top of it. So how do you think this can reshape how companies think about their opportunities within the use that they give already to the Box software, right? Where do you think are the most interesting opportunities going forward?
We think about really the enterprise as having, tons of data, but interestingly, 90% of the data is unstructured data. So typically what we've been talking about in tech in terms of getting insights out of data has really been about that 10% of structured data, right? And then people have repositories and all of that for unstructured data, but they are not getting as much as they can out of it. And so the conversations we're having now is honestly this content strategy, right? And we're having that with customers. And I do think that the customers that are able to have that conversation now are the ones that are going to leapfrog ahead of their competitors, because they understand the value of that unstructured data, and they understand that they can fundamentally change how their company gets work done as a result of that. And of course, all of that needs to underpin any AI you apply to it. So if you don't have a logical content strategy, I think your AI gets relegated to kind of individual productivity, like, oh, someone writes up a meeting note, or someone helps schedule a meeting, or like basic stuff at the individual level. Whereas we're talking here like almost at the level of the movement to the cloud, a totally different way of doing things, right? Or even a version of this is BPO. But why would you ever need BPO again if you can do intelligent workflows? And so this whole mind shift of what an enterprise can do is very different. And again, going back to the buckets that we see one bucket that is, okay, automate the process that you have now. The second bucket is, okay, you have a process running, but now you're going to actually drive efficiency in it in a better way. So some of these processes are automated, but they're not automated with like full intelligence. And then the third bucket is all of a sudden you get to do things that you otherwise could never have done before. So let's take, a script for a movie that's sitting in Box. You can literally have it tell you all of the travel plans that need to be made for all of the actors in the movie by calendar, by time, just based on the movie script. Right. I mean, it's like no one could have ever done that before in 3 minutes, which is what the deep research agent will take now. I mean, obviously you have to kind of tell it what the rules of the road are for whatever media company you're at. But that's just like previously unimaginable. So that new bucket of completely new ways of doing things is equally as exciting to us.
I'm just thinking of everything that you just said regarding this last question. 90% of the unstructured data, the possibilities that we have now to analyze it, to put it in order, to help the growth of the company through the Box tools, we're looking at a completely different level of growth in the near future. So would you agree with that assessment that we're in the infancy also of not only AI revolution, but also data revolution? What are your takes on
100%.
that?
Yes. And I think that's the conversation that's happening in the zeitgeist today, which is, okay, what happens to the application stack? For an enterprise company that has 300, can they get down to 200? Can they get down to 100? And there is a part of this conversation of software has no future, et cetera, because of agents. But it's obviously more nuanced than that. You do need foundational applications to still be running. And so I think it will be a consolidation of them. And the beauty of the Box platform is it provides a foundational set of tools for unstructured data, no matter what process you're running. So you might be a Fortune 500 company that has a niche SaaS tool to run XYZ process. You don't have to pay for that SaaS tool anymore because you can literally automate that entire process on the Box platform. And similarly, if you're running a process that was never automated before, you can create a very easily automated intelligent workflow on the Box platform. So kind of the playground is both of them. And at a time where CIOs and CISOs have to be very thoughtful about who they give permission to let AI work within their enterprise, I do think it comes down to, or it should come down to anyway, companies that are trustworthy, have proven themselves, and really can ensure the security of the data of that company.
It's really fascinating, but we are not coming to the end of the interview with the most difficult questions, which are your personal questions and the advice that you give out. So first one would be, if you could design the perfect COO toolkit, so mixing lessons that you've acquired in your career, Google, Dropbox, Notion, what would it include?
First, it would be curiosity, because the role of a COO, at least as I experience it, is having to have a deep understanding of your customers, what they value, but then also a deep understanding of the teams and what motivates them and what excites them. And then finally, a deep understanding of what is the end-to-end system thinking that's needed to get XYZ done, right? To get XYZ outcome. And so I feel like every day I'm learning. And if a COO goes in with a learning mindset, you never stop learning, you never stop asking questions. I think that's honestly the best success formula.
All right. And now for people that are in our audience that are students, recent grads, and entrepreneurs, you've been across many different types of companies. Looking back in your career, what's the common thread that guided you through your choices to join one or the other?
I think that evolves over time. I think careers also map stages in life to some extent. And so, what I was looking to do when I was 21, just coming out of college, was okay, how do I get mentored? How do I make sure I understand how business is done? How do I make sure that I have people looking after me and pounding the table for me? And that was like very formative years for me. And I was just like a sponge in terms of the basics of business, really. I had been an econ major, but still different than just being in the business world. So I would say there was a stage in my life where I was just about the basics of business. And then there was a stage of career where you realize, oh, wow, all of this can't happen unless there are teams working together. And so, how does one get teams to work effectively together? And what motivates teams? And how do you get that humming of an engine that's like so delightful when you see it in execution mode? And so that was a time where I was looking for a role in companies where we could build that together. And I very much found that at Google Cloud, and then of course at Dropbox and Notion. And that was just really fun scaling. At Google Cloud, we went from 400 million to 9 billion when I was there. But boy, were there a lot of teams involved and a lot of decision making involved. And then similarly at Notion, I think I joined when we had 65 people, right? And so we were just forming teams. And what does it look like to intentionally form a team? And frankly, what's the appropriate depth and extent of a team at that stage? Because you don't want to so much hinder the scaling by putting too many people on something. So really being thoughtful about that. And then finally, I think the common thread through all of that is just who you work with. And so it's like really the quality of the people who you work with, because at the end of the day, you go to work and then you talk to those people and you engage with those people, and 10 hours of your day, no matter what your role, how fast your stock is growing, what the market cap of your company is, comes down to the people you're interacting with every day. And I think that's where real happiness lies.
It's always about the people, right? Doesn't matter how important the tech is. Okay. And during your career, have you come across great mentor that you'd say like, okay, the lesson I learned was so great that I would
Yes.
recommend?
Oh gosh, I have had so many people teach me so many wonderful things. I would say that mentors come in different forms. You can be a mentor and an advocate. And so mentors often are kind of sharing wisdom with you. And then advocates are the ones that are pounding the table and making sure you get access to the opportunities you're excited about. And from a mentor perspective, I would say every step along the way, I had incredible mentors, sometimes in the company that I was working with. And always, I have a couple of like my personal board who are mentoring me along the way.
You're not working, you must have some hobbies outside of work. What do you do to
I would say number one, I'm not sure if this counts as a hobby, is my kids and my family. You know, they are very active in all of their activities, and I love just being part of it. It also feels fleeting, right? I have an eighth grader and a sophomore, and I can kind of count on two hands how many years I have left. So I try to sponge up all those moments. And so, yeah, I run every day because that keeps me happy and sane of mind, but I'm probably postponing my longer duration hobbies that might take multiple hours every day to once the kids are out of the house. And I'm fine with that. I love the time I spend with my family.
and maybe a favorite movie or book that you would recommend?
I like books that I learn about history or things like that. There's one called Prisoners of Geography that is actually very interesting. And it basically looks at the evolution of world powers and anchors it to the actual reality of their geography. And it makes you realize that some of the things they don't really teach you in history can be very relevant. And I think that's true when you kind of step back, sleep on it, and think about it for business as well, right? There's all the obvious business vectors that people point out when they're talking about success or failures of companies. And there's some just like foundational environmental to the ecosystem that these companies are operating in that absolutely need to be taken into account. So I loved reading that book.
All right. And let's say that you are not a COO scale, you can do anything else. What would that be?
Oh, that's an easy one. I really believe strongly that we need to address the needs of our climate situation that we're in. And so I would be a conservationist living in some land where I was protecting animals and making sure that we don't lose too many more and we protect the nature that we do have.
All right. Thank you, Olivia. That was great. Learned a lot. Yossi, back to you.
Yeah, Olivia, it's been a pleasure. And I can tell you, I started running as well. I'm now at the 5 kilometers, hopefully to make it up, but it's actually fun. I'm going to Central Park, all the uphills and downhills there, up to the lake. So fun time indeed. And Olivia, thank you so much again. And for everybody else in the audience, so stay tuned. We have other amazing episodes with the chairman of Qualcomm, CEO of Taboola, the CEO of Cohesity going to join us also next week. So it's going to be interesting. And Olivia, thank you.
Thank you, Yossi. Thank you, Alvaro.